Hello and welcome to the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast with me, Clive Barber, and my good mate, Noel Tom. For the days when you can't ride your bike, there's always the Trail and Adventure Motorbike Podcast. All right, chaps, welcome back and welcome to this week's guest, who is Andy Cook, otherwise known as Andy UpsideDown from the YouTubes. Andy joins us all the way from New Mexico in the United States of America. Andy is going to be a YouTube sensation. He's got a fantastic YouTube channel. He's just got into dirt biking and he's just got into filmmaking, and his films are utterly brilliant. So we thought it'd be great to catch up with him, find out a little bit more about him, and have a nice long chat. And it didn't go the way I was expecting it to go. There's a few surprises in there as well. He's an excellent bloke. I hope you enjoy it as much as we enjoyed chatting to him. Noel is still on a trip. He is currently in Portugal, having a damn fine time by the look of things. So this week, I'm very happy to be joined by Biker Ed Harris. Not that one. Right. Let's get on with it. How are you, sir? It's lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too. I've been listening to you guys for a while.
Well, that's nice to know that we've have something of a reach beyond Kendal, where we live in the north of England.
Well, I saw you post that you're number 2 in something, so you must have something of a reach.
Number 2 indie motorbike podcast. Depends on what metrics people are using, I think. I'd like to say I wasn't obsessed and didn't care about these things, but I am obsessed and I do care about these things.
You were so bitter when you didn't get first.
Some obscure chopper thing based out of the USA that was number 1.
Yeah, those choppers in the US are pretty popular.
That's one of the things I got down to talk about. We came across you, Andy, when I think you must have watched Noel's Bikes in Barns episode, and you said that you've got an XR 650L.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of delighted Noel isn't here, because you'd just end up talking about bloody Hondas all evening.
I was going to say he'd love that. That's right up Noel Street, isn't it? As soon as I saw that you had an XR 650, I thought, oh, Noel's going to be gutted.
Yeah, he should be here.
If people post something, I tend to click in to see if they've got a channel, and I came across your channel, and I don't think you've been going that long, but your videos are so good.
Thank you. It's a weird experience to start posting them to YouTube. I've never done anything like it before, and I'm obsessed too. You get the metrics and you just stare at them all day.
That's one thing that struck me, because I've spent the better half of this afternoon sort of trying to binge watch a lot of your videos. From someone who's never, seemingly never done any video creation before to just starting it, all of your videos are like a really high level of production quality, and you've got the kind of narration over the background, and you've even got a bit of B-roll where you put the camera up and run down and then do something. And
I think it helps that I've been watching a lot of YouTube and a lot of motorcyclists on YouTube for a long time, and just I've always been curious about filmmaking and stuff like that. And I've got a little bit of a performance background. I used to do circus acrobatics, so some knowledge of what it takes to be interesting, maybe, hopefully. I have no idea if it's interesting or not at this point, but I hope it is.
I moan about this a lot on the podcast. 90% of videos that people post, it's just pure GoPro footage. You do an awful lot more than that. And when you do GoPro footage, your commentaries are excellent and usually very funny.
It's hard to get off of that GoPro. I did this trip, and it's all kind of an experiment for me, so I think I lean a little too much on the GoPro, more than I'd like to. But I'll be getting away from that hopefully in the future. I don't know. It's hard to figure out, but I'm still trying to figure it out. It's all kind of an experiment, trying to figure out what I want to do with it. But I'm glad you guys are enjoying it.
I think just having a mix of GoPro and then something else, because so many videos on YouTube are just, an hour of just straight GoPro footage. So I think even having a bit of GoPro and then a bit of something else, even if it's just, filmed on your mobile phone, it makes a big difference. And the narration as well, to kind of keep people engaged to it.
Hang on a sec. I've just got to go and tell my son to stop throwing darts at the dartboard, because you can hear a thud. Thud. Andy, I guess before we go any further, we should get you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are and where you are, more interestingly, I guess.
My name's Andy Cook.
Sorry, no, that sounded really wrong. I said where you are is more interesting than who you are. Let me say that again, because that's not fair. Andy, before we go any further, I guess we should get you to introduce yourself. Tell us who you are. Tell us what your YouTube channel is, and also tell us where you are, which many people will be interested in.
Yeah, my name's Andy Cook. I am in the United States. I live in New Mexico, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I've been making YouTube videos for a very short period of time. I took a trip through New Mexico on the New Mexico backcountry discovery route. I did almost all of it. I didn't do the last leg of it, which would have been the first leg for me because I went from north to south. And I'm planning on making a bunch more videos. This was kind of the test run to get my feet wet and figure out how to do this. And then I'm hoping to go on longer trips to the south, into the Spanish-speaking parts of the world.
And your YouTube channel is got a great name as well.
Andy UpsideDown.
And it's not just a clever name, is it?
No, I used to do circus acrobatics. That's where that came from first. I think it was my Instagram first.
I feel bad now because I thought it was about all the times you keep falling off.
Yeah, there's enough falling off. I'm very new to off-road riding. I got a motorcycle when I was 18 and have kind of ridden off and on since then. I'm 47 now, so it's been a long time, but I've gone long stretches without riding. But all of that was street riding. I got a 72 Honda CB750. Way back then, it was already an old bike at that point, and it's had some hard stretches where it's like been left for dead in my parents' backyard for 10 years at a time, but I've brought it back a couple times. And it's the only bike I had ever had before I got the XR650.
So I'm just Googling the Honda 750 because I think that the 72 model is one of my favorite ever motorcycles.
It was basically the first inline four.
And you've had that from not since 1972.
That was in 95 when I bought it.
Oh, awesome.
So they're very different motorcycles, going from what's probably quite a revvy inline four-cylinder to a big single thumper. That's a big difference in motorcycle, right?
It is, yeah. And I'm a tall guy. I'm 6'4", and so that I don't think I ever realized it. But my old bike, which I still have, it's sitting under a tarp in front of my house, not running. It starts but kind of runs on 3 cylinders. That thing's pretty small for me, really, and I never realized it. The dirt bike fits me a lot better. I can flat foot that thing. It's got a little bit of a drop in it right now that I'm going to take out, but I can flat foot it, and that thing's got a reputation as having a really high seat height, so it fits me kind of perfect.
How do you fall off that bike at 6'4"? I'm like 5'8", 5'9", and I'd love to be 6'4".
Traction just goes away suddenly. I don't know what that's about.
What made you go from your beautiful vintage street bike and want to start off-roading?
I think I could probably blame that on YouTube. Just watching people riding off-road just looked really fun. I mean, I've ridden mountain bikes for a long time, off and on also. Everything I do, I kind of do off and on in fits and starts, but I've kind of ridden bicycles my whole life, and some of that has been mountain bikes, and it's just nice to not ride around cars and get on dirt and go to much more interesting places, I've found out. And so I think I probably saw that and got inspired to do it through watching people on YouTube mostly.
Anybody in particular that you...
I really like Ed March from C90 Adventures. I would strive to be as entertaining as him, but I don't think I can match his level of silliness, obviously.
I think you can.
I'll give it a shot.
He's not a million miles away from you, is he, now?
I don't know if he's living in Moab or what his deal is. I actually thought about trying to write him. I passed through Moab when he was probably doing his Tiny Jeep Adventures.
He's still doing his Tiny Jeep Adventures. He's just converted it to 4-wheel drive. So we're hoping to get him on the podcast, folks. Just a matter of arranging a convenient time.
I watch a couple Spanish language guys too. Charlie Sinowan, who's named himself after those who shall not be named, I gather from your podcast. Ewan and Charlie. Because his name is Carlos, and he does the same thing that they did, riding around the world. He says he's been doing it for like 14 years, I think.
Tell us a little bit more about New Mexico, which is a U.S. state, folks, not part of Mexico.
New Mexico is a U.S. state. Sometimes you get complimented on how good your English is when you live in New Mexico by people who live in other U.S. states who don't realize that it's a state, which is a funny thing. New Mexico is a state without people, largely. It's all desert. Some of it's high desert, so it's forest, and you wouldn't think it was desert because it just looks like forest with trees and all the things you expect. In the south, it's pretty low and gets really hot, but I'm up in the north, which is close to Colorado, and so we're at 7,000 feet altitude here, so we just have nice 4 seasons. We get snow in the winter, and it gets pretty hot. It gets like recently it's been getting up to 100. It used to be it would get into the 90s a few times, but as it gets hotter and hotter, it's more and more annoying.
100 Fahrenheit in centigrade, 38 degrees C. That's hot. I'm assuming you have a certain amount of freedom of where you can and can't ride in the desert, I guess.
Yeah, you can ride a ton of places. A lot of New Mexico is BLM land, which is the Bureau of Land Management, which is pretty wide open to that kind of thing. You can't take my word as gospel because I'm not super up on the rules of where you can and can't ride, but I think the BLM land is pretty wide open and you could even ride off trail in those places, and then you can camp in those places wherever you want, in campsites or not. You just put your tent down as long as you know it's BLM land or national forest land. You can just put your tent wherever you want and sleep wherever you'd like for up to like 2 weeks.
That's one thing I noticed, like watching your video series, is quite a bit of the time you're sort of riding around trying to find a campsite or somewhere suitable to camp. And I'm kind of watching it like anywhere. You can camp anywhere. It's just expansive land as far as the eye can see, but I guess there's probably still rules about where you can and can't and what's maybe public and private land.
The thing you need to worry about in New Mexico is having a campfire because it's so dry here most of the time that if it gets out of control at all, it's going to send up a lot of land. Even when they say it's okay to burn, you've got to be pretty careful about it. And you guys can't camp hardly anywhere, right?
Yeah, pretty much not allowed to wild camp in England. You can in Scotland. That said, in the Lake District National Park, where I live, me and Noel live in the north of England, they kind of allow wild camping above the tree line.
There's a lot of places that will sort of turn a bit more of a blind eye to it, or like, as long as you're not taking the mickey and you're setting up in a responsible place and you're not having a huge party, then you tend to be
That's
okay.
good.
But it's not technically legal unless you're in Scotland.
In the western states in the U.S., there's just tons and tons of places that you can camp.
Talk a little bit more about New Mexico, because it looks amazing where you are. How do people earn a living in the desert? It's quite intriguing to us here, living in greenery.
It's a very good question. My mom and dad moved here before I was born in like the early 70s, and when my grandma died, they found a postcard from my dad to her that said, "New Mexico is great. We love it here. If we can ever figure out how people make a living, we'll probably move here." And they found it when she died. And my dad showed it to me and was like, "Yeah, we never really did figure that out." And I haven't either, really. There's a fair amount of government work here. A lot of people work for the government. And then in Santa Fe and Taos and anywhere that it's touristy at all, like Santa Fe is a huge tourist town. It's all tourism, restaurants and hotels and all kinds of that regular stuff.
You don't have a background in filming. You're all completely self-taught in making films.
Yeah. There is actually a film industry here, weirdly. So the government of New Mexico has made enough tax incentives that a lot of Hollywood productions come here, just like Canada has kind of the same system and Georgia now has the same system. So there are a lot of films being made here. But no, I've been an extra on films a couple times, but I've never had any real job in a film. I'm just trying to figure it out.
So we won't see you as the next James Bond.
Definitely probably won't. I suppose I'd take it. You don't want to hear my British accent. But the way I make a living is a mystery to even me, really. I can never explain that very well. I'm mostly an expert at not spending money. I've been living most of my adult life on
My God, you and Noel would get on so well. It's such a shame he isn't here. That's what he does for a living as well.
Yeah, I've pretty much been spending like $1,000 a month for my entire adult life somehow. And so I just don't need to work very much to make that happen, luckily. And I don't love working, so I don't do that. I tried to make a living doing circus acrobatics and made part of my living doing that for probably five or 10 years. But I pretty much gave that up during COVID, or gave up on that idea during COVID. Working out every day to try to figure out how to not make a living didn't seem so appealing at that point. And since then, I kind of haven't figured it out. I play poker. Poker is the way that I've made a living for a while now, but I do that in fits and starts too. I kind of go on road trips and go somewhere for like 2 weeks to a month usually and just play a lot of poker during that time.
So you're actually playing in person, you're not playing online?
I've played online, but not for a long time.
One thing I picked up on your videos is you spend a couple of times going out and trying to find like hot springs, which is just such an alien idea living in the UK. The idea you can be, because that would be great. Like imagine riding in Wales, it's pouring with rain, it's freezing cold because it's always raining and cold, and then you just find like a lake with warm water, and like, it just sounds like such an incredible thing.
I don't know that I have ever actually kind of stumbled upon a hot spring, but there are like close to here. It's like an hour and a half drive from here, but it's because you have to go around a mountain range to get there into the Jemez Mountains. There's a few different hot springs, some of which are like private ones, and some of which are just out in the open in the forest, and you can just take a little hike to them, and they're in gorgeous spots. I had the fantasy on that trip of just stumbling upon one. But
what made you start making films? Have you an idea about what you want to get out of it?
No, it's weird. It's a funny thing. It's kind of the same situation as when I was doing circus. When I was doing circus, I started doing it just for fun on the beach in Santa Monica, California. And I got good enough. I found a partner and we moved north in California and got some coaching. But you get to a point where you're kind of good enough at something that you feel like you should share it with people and perform. That's how I felt about it. And so that's what I did with that for a while. And then I live kind of an unconventional life, to say the least, I think.
You can say that again, from circus performer to poker player.
I kind of feel like I should share that with the world. I think more people need to know that there are other ways to live their life instead of just going to work. And so I think that's part of it, is just making it known in the world that that's possible.
And I think possibly a future YouTube superstar in the making as well. So if you haven't already, jump onto YouTube and subscribe to Andy UpsideDown for some of the most charming, entertaining, funny films on motorcycles you're ever going to see.
Thank you very much.
I always find it interesting because I think with most people, at least with kind of the adventure motorcycling, they kind of either fit into two categories. They're either motorcyclists or they're like travelers, explorers. And I would definitely fit into the motorcycle category, or motorcyclists. And you probably would as well, Clive, where we started riding motorcycles and the traveling was basically just something that we stumbled across because we just kept riding further and further and kind of went into it. But then you get people, I guess maybe Ben King would be an example. I don't know if you know him, Andy, but he did a lot of traveling and living abroad, and then just riding a motorcycle was just a way for him to then try and do like a round the world trip. So with very little experience, he just bought a bike and just, rode off around the world to see how far he could get. And it looks like you've kind of done a similar thing where you've bought the bike for the purpose of going out and doing these huge trips, because being on a bike doesn't daunt you because you've done a lot of that already.
Yeah, it's kind of true. I think I'm kind of in between. I don't think I would put myself in one basket or the other, but kind of half both. I've done a bunch of traveling. Like I've lived in Mexico quite a bit. I lived in Peru for a few months. So going to the south, my Spanish is pretty decent, so it shouldn't be too crazy to me. I think I'll feel fairly comfortable with it. So it is definitely like half a means to travel in a much nicer way, in my mind, than an airplane, a car, or, God forbid, a cruise ship. The motorcycling definitely holds kind of an equal amount of appeal to me. When I stop riding a motorcycle, I always end up on a motorcycle again and just start kicking myself like, how did I ever stop doing this? It's so much fun, and maybe I need to get refreshed for a time to love it again. I don't know if I get burned out on it or not. I think usually my motorcycle just breaks down and I'm too cheap to fix it a lot of the time. And then I just kind of forget.
Could you potentially travel the world playing poker?
Maybe. It is kind of part of the plan. Like, it would be amazing to figure out how to make money off YouTube and maybe work Patreon into it eventually if people want to support my travels. But probably in the meantime, I'll have to either play along the road or stop the travels and come back to places that I know that I've won in the past and just play for a while to finance it. One way or the other. I played once in Mexico when I was there and won a little bit of money. And then I went to the cage to cash my chips in. And the woman just looked at me and threw up her hands and she was like, I don't have cash. Sorry. She was in a tiny room that was separated by glass to another tiny room, and there was a guy in there surrounded by stacks of cash that I could see just counting them by hand. And I waited like an hour and then just gave up, gave my chips to I was dating someone there at the time, and her friend had invited me there to play. I just gave up because my girlfriend was waiting to take me home. Gave my chips to her friend, and he cashed them later in the night and paid me later. There's fishy things that happen in places you don't know sometimes.
Are you always playing in a casino type place then?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah. Actually, yeah, all the time. I don't really play home games. There's a lot of home games. I've been playing in Texas a lot recently, and there's still a lot of home games that happen there, but I haven't messed with them.
That would make a great YouTube series, wouldn't it? Traveling around the world whilst playing poker to fund it.
Presumably you don't win all the time. You also lose sometimes.
I definitely lose much of the time. Poker's a really stupid way to make an easy living, is a common saying. I mean, I guess if you start your own business, then you'll have losing days, but there's not a lot of jobs where you can show up to work and they take money from you. It'll make you crazy eventually. That's a lot of the reason that I don't play consistently. There was a chunk of like 10 years there where I was playing pretty much every day. It really wears on you after a while. I like it much better if I just play until I'm burned out and then go do other things.
What's the key skill with poker? Is it a psychological thing or is it skill with...
It's a combination of a lot of things. It's definitely not math for me. I'm kind of terrible at math, even like just basic adding up how much money is in the pot. I get close, but I don't have a perfect count on it most of the time. For me, it's patience is a huge part of it. You need to be able to just wait until the stars align and you have the right cards to play, which is maybe 10% of the time. Reading people, knowing it's kind of like a combination, if you're playing live, of being able to tell what's going on in someone's mind, both by looking at them, but people put way too much weight on that. It's more about kind of knowing where their mind's at and what their motivation is for doing what they're doing at that exact moment.
Is that a reason to play in person rather than to play online?
For me, it is. There's a lot of people who think that playing online is kind of a more pure form of the game, and they'll scoff at being able to read a person and be able to tell what they're thinking. And I think they're right, but there was a moment where online poker became illegal in the US. There was this sketchy little law that got snuck in literally in the middle of the night attached to I forget what it was. I think it was a national defense bill. It was just this little thing tacked onto the end of the bill, and it made online poker completely illegal in the US. And at that point, I pretty much stopped playing. I had stopped playing a little before that, but since then I haven't wanted to. And there's been a lot of cheating scandals, and there's been a lot of very good people who play online, and they play like 5 or 10 tables, sometimes 20 tables at a time. Whether they are robots or whether they are human robots, I don't much want to play against them. The games, when you show up in person, tend to be a lot easier to beat.
Talk to us about the motorcycling scene in New Mexico where you live. America, Harleys, right? Everybody rides a Harley. No other bikes at all.
New Mexico is very heavy on Harleys. Well, it's kind of like the older crews of people tend to ride Harleys, and then the younger people, I guess it's true in a lot of places, tend to ride sport bikes. There's, of course, an adventure bike scene. I'm not plugged into any of it. I'm kind of a loner in a lot of ways, and am not real attached to any motorbike scene in the States.
What made you pick the XR650 rather than, going out and buying a new Tenere or
Well, money. First.
Sure.
First, money. Tenere, I do like the Tenere. I think of the modern ones, I think Tenere is kind of the one that I would like, of the bigger bikes at least.
You'd have to play a lot of poker though.
Yeah, I'm not that interested in it. I think in my mind, I wanted something that was lower tech, that didn't have computers. There is a computer on the XR650, but not much of one. It's carbureted. So in my mind, it made sense, because if I want to travel south of the border and have problems, it's way more likely that I'll find somebody to help me that knows carbureted bikes better than fuel-injected bikes, and find some kind of part to fix the thing. Most of it was money, probably. So I was looking kind of at DR650s and XR650s, and I like that the XR650 is more dirt-oriented and taller. Since I'm so tall, I think I was just drawn to it. I also kind of like Hondas. I had a Honda Civic, and my old Honda.
Oh, it's such a shame Noel isn't here, isn't it? It would just be Honda talk the whole time.
He's going to be so upset he's missed you.
That'll teach him to go on those motorcycle rides and miss sitting in rooms looking at screens.
The next trip is going to be heading south.
Yeah, I don't make plans very much, but a loose plan in my mind is to wait out the summer here and then head south in the fall, either when it makes sense to, or more likely a little bit after it makes sense to, because I'm a very slow starter. Once it gets cold here, it gets cold at night here. I don't know. I'll have to look at it, but head south and just figure out where I want to enter Mexico. I think probably look at Baja California because I've never been there, and everybody says they love riding there.
Do you think you've learned a lot from the first sort of, I don't know how long you were actually riding for the BDR trip you did?
For sure, yeah. I felt way more comfortable by the end of it. It was 12 days, if I'm not giving anything away. There's no big cliffhangers in my trip.
Your last video is when because I've just watched it, you've just started the bike up and there's all that smoke coming out the back. So you've got the hang of leaving it on a cliffhanger now.
That's true. Don't tell anybody. Who knows if the bike survives? I don't know.
Would you pack differently or change the setup of the bike or change your kit? Or
I definitely need to respring the bike. Everybody says it comes pretty softly sprung from the factory, and I'm a bigger guy. I weigh somewhere around 200. Somewhere between 190 and 210.
You see, we have stones and pounds.
Stones, you guys, that stone thing is just ridiculous.
A stone is 14 pounds. So what did you say? 200 pounds divided by 14. It's about, 14 stone.
You really use that stone thing? That's not a relic?
I'm trying so hard to work in kilograms because I know how stupid it is, but I was raised in stone and pounds, so I can still understand that the easiest.
But if it was a car, you would measure it in kilos, right?
It makes no fucking sense.
So it's just humans? Is it just things with blood that you measure with stone?
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah. Because, motorbikes, we do those in kilos, don't we? So, I know my CRF's 150 kilos, but I know I'm really fat in stones. I'm not telling you how many stones. Yeah, so you're 14 stones. But presumably at some point there was a fucking stone that somebody went, right, this is it. We're going to measure everything against this stone.
Do they not even have the stone anymore? You'd think they would have kept it.
I'll let you know in the footnotes to this episode. Or maybe not. We'll see how we go. How far south are you going? You said Mexico. Are you going to end up in Central America, further south maybe?
Yeah, the idea would be to go to Argentina and then see if I want to ship the bike somewhere and keep going. But, that idea has been in my brain for a while, and I've started dating someone here, and all those plans get muddied by things at points. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. The good thing about my girlfriend is she's super open and supportive to me doing this, and she also wants to go to places that are down there herself. She's taking Spanish classes online from Guatemala right now, so she might go to Guatemala and I'll meet her there, or she might go to Argentina and I'll try to meet her there. We'll see.
Does she ride, or is she going to learn to ride?
She actually has a motorcycle that is in real bad shape, similar to my original one right now, but she's talking about getting like a CR250 or...
She sounds like a keeper.
That's what I'm talking about her getting, if I'm honest. But she does want a motorcycle.
So what's the next film going to be, though? We're not going to have to wait for your Central America, South America trip. Are you going to make some more films in the interim?
Yeah, there's more coming just of the BDR. I'll finish that out. I think that last one I posted was only day 4 of the trip. So there's a bunch more. I think the next one is going to be 2 or 3 days. So I think they'll start hopefully covering more ground, because I feel like just kind of the story coming up needs that. But beyond the next video, I'm not sure how many days those ones will come. But so there's more coming from that, and then maybe some video around Santa Fe, and maybe just I'll have to do some stuff to the bike. So maybe some updates on getting the bike together to go further south.
I think one thing you said in the last video, that you're from New Mexico. You find those straight roads a bit boring, really, but I think it would be a good thing for you to explore where you live a little bit more and to show that a bit more, because it's very new to us.
It's easy to get caught up in the place you live being so normal to you, and you don't realize how many people out there have never seen anything like it. New Mexico is a very unique place. There's so few people here. In Santa Fe, most of the buildings look like they were made of adobe. They're The new ones were not, but this place that I'm sitting right now is an old adobe house. And so the city has a very different look than people are used to seeing.
America is so vast and so very varied. It's, you go from Alaska through to Colorado looks amazing as well. It's one place I'd really like to go.
Colorado is amazing. I actually get kind of overwhelmed by Colorado sometimes. You go up there from New Mexico, because northern New Mexico is very similar in a lot of ways to a lot of Colorado. We have mountains and all the stuff, but everything, the volume is just kind of turned up in Colorado. So the mountains are higher and more jagged. There's more people everywhere. The people have way more money. And so there's like more upscale establishments. But even just being out in the mountains, eventually in Colorado, I'm kind of done with it. It's just too much for me. I just kind of want to come back to New Mexico and see things that I know.
So is there a BDR? I don't know if it's worth maybe mentioning a bit more about the BDR, because obviously I know a bit about it, you know a bit about it, Clive, but my understanding is it's a bit like we have the TET, the Trans-Euro Trail, and also the Adventure Country Tracks, the ACT. Is it kind of like that, where you have a free route that you can download for different areas of the country?
Exactly, yeah. I don't know how it works financially. It seems like they've got a decent bit of organization in the thing, but yeah, you just download the tracks for free. It's all 2-track stuff. I think there's some options of harder routes, but I think you can drive or ride the entire thing if you stay on the main routes.
2-track, you mean like suitable for a car, for a 4x4?
Yeah. There's no single track on any of it, I think. There's a couple sections, like I took the options that I think they call the expert sections when I went through New Mexico, and one of them's not too hard, and one of them is fairly hard, for me at least. It was pretty hard. It's this valley that got washed out by a huge flood. It wasn't so hard for a while, but then this flood went through and took away all the soil, so it's all just like head-sized boulders and river washes going through it. So I spend 2 days in that coming up.
There's loads of routes. Northern California.
There's so many of them.
Oregon, Wyoming, Northeast, Southern California, Mid-Atlantic, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, Idaho, Colorado, Washington.
There's pretty much a BDR in every western state, I think. Maybe there's a couple that don't have it, and then there's some in the east also. There's definitely more set up for big bikes. Pretty much any bike you want to take, if it's off-road capable at all, is going to be fine on the BDR.
It's often said on the TAMP podcast that big bikes are much superior to the little bikes for riding like that.
Yeah. Everybody agrees on that, right?
Dear me.
Big sigh.
It was going to come up.
Ed is a big bike rider. He does ride both small and large bikes. In fact, you did quite well, didn't you, the other weekend, Ed?
Yeah. On little bikes, that was. I joke, I like the big bikes, but anything with 2 wheels.
I'm sure the big bikes are fun as well.
What was it, Ed? And you came third, didn't you?
Hare and Hound Enduro, which is very common over here in the UK. It's kind of like cross-country racing. I guess it might be called, like, more common names would be like sprint racing, I guess, where it's quite quick, sort of 6-mile long laps.
But I would imagine in the US, looking at the some of the 2-tracks you call them, a big bike over there looks like it would be perfect, really.
I think they're largely formulated for that. I really didn't do much research on the route before I went, and so I didn't know what to expect. I knew I didn't have too much bike for it, you know? My bike's not a small trail bike, but it's not a big bike for sure. Those long gravel roads just bore me for the most part. Bore me and kind of scare me. That's what I crashed on in that first video when I left, was just a long gravel road. I'm more comfortable on them now after having done the whole thing, but they just kind of put me to sleep. When there's a turn coming, I'm like, oh, hey, I have to think about controlling this bike, and it doesn't always work out all that well.
That did make me chuckle when you were coming down the hill, and then you've got a sharp left-hand corner, and it's just the most chilled out crash I think I've ever seen. Like, you're not fazed by it at all. You just like run on and ditch it on the floor, and it's not a drama at all.
In the 2 or 3 seconds when it was happening, I was pretty freaked out, but it worked out pretty well.
Would you ever consider doing some training, do you think, to improve your skills, or are you just going to get out there and do it?
I would like to. It's part of me being cheap means that it's not real likely that I will. If somebody wanted to invite me to a school for free for some reason, that would be amazing. I would love to do it.
So much like Noel.
I tend to not get any formal schooling if I don't have to, but I know that it would help a ton.
Well, we've got 2 TAMP podcast favourites. We've got Break Magazine, our friend Lel Pavey. He's amazing.
He's
and Chris Birch, obviously, as well. He does some free stuff.
Yeah, I've only watched a few of his.
But you can also subscribe. It's not crazy expensive, I don't think, and he opens up a whole world of training to you. But yeah, Lel's is all... I think there's some stuff behind a Patreon paywall, but most of it is free, I think. So there's some great tips from him.
I've definitely tried to suck up as much knowledge from YouTube as I could.
Most of the commentaries are you recording in helmet as you ride along, but you're then building the story of the trip, doing the commentary afterwards. What's the process to that? Do you actually sit down and write, or are you literally just recording to camera and whatever comes out?
I mostly just talk. Often I'll kind of just watch the video and talk along with it and try to figure out what I want to say and know that that first draft kind of is not going to be the one that stays in the video. And then I just kind of refine that over and over again. I have written some things down. I find that it kind of kills the life in my voice when I read it, which I would get better at if I practiced more, for sure. But
don't go changing the voice. The voice is great.
This is the first time I've ever really used my voice for performance. Like that whole time that I was doing circus stuff, I pretty much never talked on stage. I just lifted people up and went upside down and stuff. Had people look at me when music was playing. It's a very strange situation.
You've done some work on the bike to get it ready for travel. Is it there yet, or do you need to do a few more things?
No, I need to do a few things. I don't know what that oil problem is yet. I'm hoping it's probably...
We've not had that released yet, so we don't even know that there is a problem.
There's smoke. For sure there's smoke. Because it's a 20-year-old bike.
We know there's a problem. We saw some very black smoke. Now, the good news is Ed is a drivetrain, what do you call it, engineer?
Oh, I've moved now. Was a powertrain engineer. I'm now a concept engineer, so I get to play with the crayons now.
What would you say that Andy needs to check?
I think you probably mentioned it, Andy. The valve stem seals are probably a good one to look at.
Yeah, right. And then if it's not that, it's going to be rings, and I'm in...
It could be rings, but rings I think would be less likely. I would look at valve stem seals first, and I think it's the easier thing to change first.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I have a Mazda Miata that smokes a lot in a very similar manner. Like it's worse on a cold morning. It'll smoke a lot. And I did the valve stem seals on that, and then it got worse. So I'm a little discouraged by doing it.
You could just keep topping it up with oil.
That is how I tend to operate, yeah. I'm actually kind of tempted to try to make my own saddlebags, but I'm not sure if I'm going to do that. I just put a new rack on it. I put a little protection on it. I definitely need to get into the suspension and respring it, change the oil and stuff. But just some general maintenance stuff and get my spares together. I've got some spares that I brought on that part. I felt pretty well prepared, but if I'm going to be gone for a really long time, there's probably more I want to take.
And you find the fuel range okay? I don't actually know how big the fuel tanks are on these bikes.
The fuel tank is huge on that bike. The stock one is not. The stock one's like 2.5 or 3 gallons, I think. But this bike has like a almost 6 gallon tank on it.
And what kind of range will that give you, do you think?
I'm comfortable at 200. But I think it'll really do like 220, 230.
Is that enough for the kind of riding you're doing?
I don't know. It was enough for what I did, for sure. I only almost ran out of gas once, but that was my fault.
So does the BDR point out gas stations?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It was crazy how seldom I was in a town or saw people at all.
It looks very remote, and I can't imagine there's a lot of fuel stations on the route that you do.
No, there aren't. I went like 20 minutes out of my way to go to one. It's impressive how much wide open land there is in New Mexico. I mean, I've always known it, but I've never gotten as far off the beaten track as I did on that trip in my life. It was good.
If something bad does happen, like you fall, maybe break a leg or something like that, what are the options then when you're in the middle of the desert in New Mexico?
Drink the lots of water that you brought with you. I've got like a 10-liter water bag. And then like 3 more liters in a Camelback that I had with me. So that'll last a couple days at least. And, just drag yourself by your hands. No, I didn't have one for this trip, but I will get a GPS thing, a spot or inReach or whatever, because it's real easy to be in a bad spot.
There isn't cell reception everywhere.
No, not at all. And it's really strange. It'll sneak up on you at times you don't expect it. Like I'd be riding along and hear my phone ding, and it would just be in a place that you couldn't imagine possibly had cell reception. But there's a lot of New Mexico that doesn't have it.
You're carrying 13 liters of water on you said, at any time. And Is that just so that if you break down, like, you could be, maybe a couple of days hiking even to get to the nearest civilization?
Yeah. And the desert's no joke. You're not going to run up on a little stream to get some questionable water from, even a lot of the time. It's no joke. And since I've grown up in the desert, even I think when I'm traveling in places that do have more water just sitting on the ground, I think I'll probably keep carrying that much water just because I've had it beat into my brain so much growing up in the desert that you never leave yourself without water.
And there's very little shade from what I've seen as well, so you can't even sit under a tree.
Yeah. It wouldn't have been so bad during that time. It was late October. It was the second half of October when I made that trip. And so the weather was really gorgeous. It would actually probably usually be too late in the season. It would have been pretty cold, but that was a warm end of the year. I got really lucky that time. And so it was really nice. So you wouldn't be dehydrating so fast in that situation. But if you did it closer to the middle of the summer, it would be insane. You'll see this summer, Clive, when you're in the Valley of Death. Crazy thing about Death Valley right now is that like a huge part of it has turned into a big lake because of crazy rains they had recently. Yeah, they've got a bunch of those dry lake beds there, and at least one of them just filled with water, and it's stayed till now.
Must know you're coming, Clive. The rain's got there ahead of you.
I don't know how much riding you've done in America, Andy, but where would you want to go to other than heading south, or where would you recommend other people if they're heading to the US? Where should we go? Everybody heads to the US and wants to ride Route 66, but that doesn't hold a massive
That would
appeal.
be horrible. Route 66 would be just long, straight highways. Rent a Harley. You'll find no end of places to rent a Harley if you want to ride Route 66 and just sit there with your stereo blasting as you burn your face on mostly the freeway. It's hard to find. I mean, in towns, there's a lot of Route 66 that exists. Just down in Albuquerque here, there's a huge stretch of Route 66 that goes through town. That's Central Avenue where I grew up. No, I have no desire to do that. Anything in the Rocky Mountains, any of those states. So New Mexico, Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana's incredible.
We're talking the cowboy states, aren't we?
Yeah. I'm from New Mexico, so I'm partial to the West. Every time I head to the East at all, like I have a camper van also that I spend time in when I'm playing poker largely. And I headed east. I've been heading to Texas a lot, but I made it as far as Little Rock, Arkansas, which is kind of pretty close to the middle of the country. And I thought maybe I was going to go to Florida, but I got that far east and was like, I just don't have any interest in going to the eastern half of this country, and I turned around.
You drive around living out the camper van playing poker when you're going.
Yeah.
Man, how have you not ridden around the world yet? Like, it's the perfect mixture of, like, you've grown up with motorcycles and lived this kind of traveling life as well.
I'm a slow starter. People think you're supposed to do these things in your 20s, but this might be my 20s. I don't know.
My 15-year-old son is thinking about it now. What job do I need to do, Dad, so I can travel the world and earn some money and just keep traveling and doing all that? If you can make money playing poker.
The job is less important than the learning how to live without the money, in my opinion. I mean, if you can get some tech job that makes pounds or dollars and you can move to a third world country and live off the pounds, then you're going to be in great shape. And that's kind of a dream if you like staring at your computer all the time. But otherwise, just live for no money. You don't really need all the shiny things.
Good lesson for me, I think.
It's hard, though. It would be impossible with a family. I mean, not impossible. There's examples of it, but it would be really, really hard with a family.
Sounds like Clive's about to go tell his 15-year-old son to start playing poker.
He's the smart one, actually. He could make a living doing that.
It's a very weird way to make a living. In fact, I didn't make any money last year. I lost money playing poker last year for the entire year. And it's mostly because I hardly played because I went on a trip in the spring. I had this moment where I was winning for like the first week I was there. I was winning at a rate that was really unusual for me. And then one day it just turned completely the other direction and I started losing. And probably in half that period of time, I had lost it and ended up losing more and then went home. And then I was all stuck in my head about it and I couldn't get out of it. And you just get stuck in these ruts in poker that are really hard to get out of. And so I didn't play much that year and I didn't make any money that year. I had gotten back to about even by the end of the year, but it was rough.
What kind of stakes are we talking about? What's the average pot like?
I'm generally playing the smallest games in the room. I was playing mostly No Limit Hold'em. Usually I buy in for around $300.
That's a much bigger number than I thought you were going to say.
Oh, really? So the minimum would be $100.
But you're saying you live for $1,000 a month and a buy into a game is $300.
Yeah, it's really absurd, the disparity between the amount of money I'm playing for in poker and the amount of money that I live on. Like, I can win sometimes enough in a night to live on for like 4 months.
The stress would get to me. I couldn't do it. Because if you have a bad night, then that's like a month worth of living.
Yeah, it's kind of like two separate worlds in my brain somehow.
I'll tell you what, listeners, I didn't expect this conversation to be going this way tonight. I don't know Andy at all, other than having watched his videos online, but I didn't expect to be talking to a circus performer stroke poker player, that's for sure.
There's a hell of a YouTube series in this, isn't there?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I mentioned it very much in the whole of this trip when I was making these videos. I don't think I talk about much in my life other than just the trip, so if it does get there, it'll be surprising to some people that had no idea.
Sounds like the start of a very good Tarantino film, to be honest. Tell us a little bit more about your YouTube channel. Where can we find you? What videos are on there and what's coming next?
My YouTube channel is Andy UpsideDown, all in one word with the lower cases. Right now, the bulk of what's on there is this New Mexico backcountry discovery route trip that I took. And there are more videos to come on that. And then after that, I am going to make videos about traveling south in Latin America. There's an Instagram also under the same name. And that's about it for social that I use so far.
Thoroughly recommend Andy's videos. Get them before everybody else sees them. And let's see if we can find him a few more followers.
Yes.
And we can all become his friend before he's really massive and famous and won't want to talk to us anymore. A massive thanks to both Andy and Ed for helping to produce an excellent podcast. Make sure you check out Andy on Andy UpsideDown on YouTube and his Instagram account as well. His film's genuinely great. I really enjoyed them. That's the only reason I got in touch with them, so I am sure you'll like them too. Right, one more thing before we go. David Goldman, who featured in an episode last year about his photography series of notable people in the motorcycle industry, is over in the UK exhibiting his photographs at the Bike Shed Moto Show, London 2024. The Bike Shed Moto Show is an annual motorcycle exhibition like no other, celebrating the creative culture around motorcycles and motorcycle people. Open to all, whether they live to ride or simply enjoy motorcycles as art, engineering, creators of adventures or symbols of independence. So David's going to be in London at the show. It's in Tobacco Dock on Saturday the 25th and Sunday the 26th of May. The doors open at 10 a.m. I'm hoping to get down on Saturday to go and hang out with David again because he's always good for a laugh. It's at Tobacco Dock in Wapping. I think Shadwell is the nearest tube. If you fancy coming along, come and say hello. It'd be lovely to see you there. And here's a quick chat with David, telling us a little bit more about his trip in Europe and more about the show as well. I'm not in it, apparently. It's only fucking David Goldman.
Fuck yeah.
How was the rest of Europe?
This sounds really dumb. Maybe I shouldn't say this out loud. But I thought all of Europe... Fuck, this sounds so dumb. I'm going to say it anyway. I erroneously thought that all of Europe, other than some Eastern Bloc countries, is on the euro. And it turns out some countries are not on the euro. When I tried to buy some incredibly overpriced chocolate in Switzerland, I was going to pay with euros. I just got the fucking dirtiest look.
Switzerland is very, very, very expensive for everything, really. But you enjoyed it.
Oh, I loved it. I tried to really stay conscious of, not in a hippy-dippy way, but really tried to stay present in the idea that I was having this incredible experience and not to let things piss me off where maybe I would have been pissed off. I'm like, holy shit, I this is amazing. I'm riding through these roads in Spain. And I think in the first month, to be honest, when I was in the UK, I was really racing around because there's so many incredible builders and riders and just people to photograph. And I had a month sounds like a decent amount of time. But in fact, when you only have 3 months total and you're spending 1/3 of your whole trip in the UK, kind of got gobbled up. So I felt a little bit spun when I got to France, and I really needed to kind of like put the brakes on because I was starting to not have fun. I just felt like I was fucking racing around, and I didn't want that to be the experience I had. So I kind of consciously slowed down and wanted to just enjoy the rides, and I downloaded Kalimoto. Mark Wells from Royal Enfield, he told me to download it. He was talking about it as if he was like a shareholder. And he's like, listen, I don't own any part of the company and they're not paying me, but this is an incredible app. And honestly, it really fundamentally changed my ride.
I might get that. I think you have to pay for it though, don't you?
You have to pay for it. You pay for it for a year. Honestly, for all this shit that we pay for, if you are riding a lot, then I think it was like $60 or something. It was totally worth it for me. I don't know if I would do it in Nova Scotia where I live. It doesn't seem necessary, but
I think it's one of those things, isn't it? Because Noel is a big fan of not planning things and not following routes and not doing tours. But if you've got limited time and you don't know where you are, where you're going, then why the fuck not spend a few quid? You're coming back to the UK though. What's going on?
I'm very excited to let the folks at the TAMP podcast be the first to know that I'm going to be in London at Hoo Hoo's on Wednesday. No, I'm not going to be in London at Hoo Hoo's. I'm going to be the motorcycle portraits. Photos are going to be on display at the Bike Shed show at the Tobacco Docks in London, the weekend of May 24th to the 26th. So if you're in London and you want to check out photos, there's going to be 20 of them that are printed really large. They're going to look super, super cool.
Am I going to be one of them?
It's a good question.
You haven't put me in, have you?
You'll have to come and find out.
I was going to wear the same clothes and get you to take another picture of me standing in front of the photograph. Fuck that, I'm not going if I'm not in it.
You might not be in it, to be honest. I had to pander.
There's a few more famous people than me there, so they probably got priority, no doubt. Do you know much about the rest of the show? What else is going on at the Tobacco Dock show? It's a bike show, isn't it? A custom bike show mainly.
I mean, I've never been. I've watched some of the videos. And so if you're familiar with the Bike Shed in London, which is a really cool destination, they have just a wild space. It's this beautiful old brick space with these kind of arches, and you can ride your motorcycle kind of right into it and park it. And then they have great food. I mean, they have a barber shop and they have, swag to buy. But they also have amazing bikes, like custom bikes on display. And some of the most incredible bikes that I've seen. So the Bike Shed is in London. And then last year or 2 years ago, I guess, they opened one in Los Angeles. And so I photographed Vicky and Dutch, who are the co-founders in LA, and have become kind of friendly with them.
I bet they're in it.
Yeah, they're in it.
Are you going to be there every day?
All 2 days?
Sorry, both days, yeah.
I will be there answering questions and signing autographs. And the images are for sale. I understand that it's kind of a very limited niche who might want to buy them. I should have brought the picture of you because I know your wife would have bought it just to destroy it to get it out of the market.
That's entirely possible, actually. Well, you could just bring another one on the plane over, couldn't you, and just put that up separately?
Actually, it was printed in London. I can give you the URL and you can just order it. You could order 20 of yourself and just plaster it all over the fucking place. Put it in the bathroom.
Noel will want one for his Christmas box, so that's guaranteed.
For sure he will.
I'm going to try and get down on the Saturday, so if anybody is going to go, come and say hello to me or David, or just ignore David and come and say hello to me. Either's good.
Yeah, either's definitely good. But it looks to be awesome. One of the things that I like about it, from what I've seen, is they're really very cool custom bikes. I'm not a huge sort of Harley fan. I certainly like some of the custom Harleys, and I've photographed some amazing builders, but it's not like a bunch of Harley dudes. It's a cross section of great, including Harleys, but a cross section of all kinds of builders and custom bikes. So it looks to be pretty awesome.
It is. It's a very good show, sort of the creme de la creme of custom bikes in the UK. So it is well worth a visit if you're in the area.
Most deaf, as the kids say.
Thanks for listening. We really appreciate your support. Don't forget you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And if you really appreciate what we do, you could consider supporting us on Patreon or buy us a coffee. Links are available on our website, which is tampodcast.com, tampodcast.com, where we also have a limited selection of branded stuff. But either way, please keep listening and spreading the word. See you next time.